Simon & Schuster AudioWorks presents Star Trek, Time for Yesterday by A.C. Crispin. This program is read by James Doohan, with Leonard Nimoy as the voice of Spock.
Time. Most beings perceive it as running in only one direction, from present to future, from now until tomorrow, and all the tomorrows allotted to us, all the years or days remaining in our lives. But I have seen a different face of time. I have traveled backward, through the centuries, through millennia, not once, but several times. I know the dangers of tampering with the past. In a doomed world's bygone age, I knew a woman named Zarabeth, whose loneliness exceeded my own. My son was born to her 5,000 years ago, and grew to manhood on Sarpedon, surviving alone for years in a desolate ice age. When I learned of Zar's existence, I brought him forward to my own time, but he would not stay. He, too, knew the dangers of altering the time stream, and remaining in my present would have changed his own world's past. Zar returned to the Sarpedon of 5,000 years ago. Yet it is difficult for me to think of him as dead, even though it has been nearly 15 years or 50 centuries since we parted. I think of Zar as someone still living on the other side of those millennia, not as someone who has been dust since before the time of Serac. Perhaps that is illogical, but the ties of blood can render even the most astute logic uncertain. And over the years I have discovered that, at times, there are things that transcend logic. I would not willingly admit this to Leonard McCoy, of course, but within myself, I know this to be true. Just as I know that something is very wrong with our universe. Time has been altered, its natural flow speeded up. Waves of accelerated time are moving throughout the galaxy at speeds greater than those attained by any of our Federation starships. Stars in the paths of these waves of accelerated time are dying prematurely. Achernar, Canopus, Alpha Centauri b. Entire planets have been engulfed by their stars, entirely blotted out of existence or seared into charred lumps of blackened slag. This threat to the galaxy is the worst ever faced. Worse than V'ger. Much worse. If these time waves continue, it could mean the end of our entire universe. Admiral Harry Morrow summoned me, Admiral James T. Kirk, and Dr. Leonard McCoy. We met him aboard his ship, the Cochise, under the tightest possible security, and there he told us the origin of these waves of accelerated time. The Guardian of Forever is malfunctioning. If the time portal is not returned to normal activity, the strain on the fabric of space-time will literally rip our universe apart.
Harry Morrow's dark, handsome face was haggard with strain and fear. That's why I called you three here. Since the Enterprise discovered the Guardian all those years ago, I wanted your insights on a way to stop this destruction. Spock steepled his fingers. Precisely what is the Guardian doing? Those time displacement waves it gives off have changed, Mr. Spock. They're being emitted at widely varying intervals. Leonard McCoy shook his head. It's hard to believe that those waves are actually speeding up time. The Guardian can talk, you know. Have you asked it what's gone wrong? It hasn't responded to any attempts at communication for 174 solar days. We lost contact with the archaeological team and the patrolling starship 2 months ago. We're presuming the worst. Spock hesitated and then asked, Have you tried a telepath? Harry Morrow frowned, puzzled. Why should a telepath be able to communicate with it? Isn't it just an incredibly advanced computer? James Kirk gave the Vulcan a sharp glance. When we first discovered the Guardian, Spock studied it. He knows as much about it as anyone living. I know. I read his report. Mr. Spock, you never mentioned that you had mind-melded with the time portal. Kirk glanced at McCoy, knowing that the doctor was also remembering the person who had melded with the Guardian. It was Spock's theory that... The Vulcan raised a hand, and Kirk subsided into uneasy silence. I did not attempt telepathic contact with the Guardian, Admiral Morrow, but I saw it done. Well, since the Guardian is one of the best-kept secrets in the Federation, Mr. Spock, I must insist that you identify this individual. Admiral, the person who mentally communicated with the Guardian was my son, Tsar. Your... Morrow could not mask his amazement. Mr. Spock, but your personnel records never... pardon me for having to ask. Kirk wondered what it had cost the Vulcan to speak of a subject he hadn't referred to in over a decade. Morrow recovered himself. Well, the important thing is that contact was established. What your son did once, he may be able to do again. You'll have to ask him to help us. A shadow crossed Spock's dark eyes. I fear such a request is impossible, Admiral. My son has been dead for 5,000 years. Spock watched Morrow's mouth drop open at this second greater shock, but schooled his features not to betray the amusement he felt. Perhaps I should explain. Please do. The Vulcan told Morrow of the time the Enterprise tried to warn the people of Sarpedon that their star, Beta Niobe, was about to nova. But when Spock, Kirk, and McCoy beamed down, they discovered all the inhabitants had taken refuge in their planet's past. Through a mischance, Spock and McCoy had been sent back 5,000 years to a past ice age. In that subarctic waste, they discovered Zarabeth, a woman who had been wrongly exiled. It would have been fatal for the officers to remain with her, and equally deadly for her to go back with them. They were forced to leave her behind when they returned. The Vulcan glanced at McCoy's expression. He is surprised that I can speak about what happened with such equanimity. Before Kolinar, I could not have done so. And Zarabeth was... Spock nodded. Tsar's mother. And you rescued him from that ice age? Yes, though I miscalculated our jump through the Guardian slightly, and we found a man in his mid-20s instead of a child. Tsar stayed aboard the Enterprise for 7 weeks and helped us avert a Romulan invasion of Gateway. But then he returned to the past because he did not want to chance creating a time paradox by staying. Spock's mouth tightened as he remembered seeing his son for the last time. But before he went, he spoke telepathically with the Guardian. Rather effortlessly, in fact. He touched it, and it obeyed his mental command without question. Morrow looked thoughtful. Too bad Tsar can't help us now. I'm afraid that this time, Spock, it's going to be up to you. Spock nodded. Tsar's Esper abilities far exceeded my own, Admiral, but I will do my best, sir. Morrow turned to Kirk. Can you leave for Gateway tomorrow, Jim? We don't have much time before the damage to the universe caused by all these time waves becomes irreparable. How long do we have? The physicists calculate 90 days. 90 days? Kirk stared at his commanding officer aghast, feeling his heart slam against his ribs. My God, Harry! You said it, Jim. That's why I called you 3. You're the best we have. I only hope our best is good enough this time. It has to be, Jim. It has to be. Personal log, supplemental. Just being aboard the Enterprise again has given me hope. It's so good to be back out here where I belong. If only there was some way I could talk Harry Morrow into letting me stay in space after this mission is finished, one way or another. If we fail, I know where I want to be when it all ends. In space, aboard my ship, with my friends. Commander Sulu looked up from his board. Entering Sector 90.4 in 60 seconds, sir. Kirk saw Spock watching him, waiting for his signal. Full sensor monitoring, Mr. Spock. If we hit any of those time waves ourselves, we'll be dust before we even know what's happened. Almost immediately, Uhura called. Time wave. Bearing 436, mark 28. Evasive, Mr. Sulu. The Enterprise heeled over so fast that everything lurched, then steadied. Spock, can you give us a schematic showing those waves so Mr. Sulu can plot a course in? Difficult, Admiral. They spread out. In places, they overlap. Do your best. We can't just go on leapfrogging over them. We'll plunge into another one. Kirk watched the glowing schematic on the navigator screen. The violet lines representing the time waves coiled around Gateway's small red sphere like a nest of cobras. Finally, the helmsman turned back. Course plotted and laid in, sir. Very good, Mr. Sulu. Stand by to implement. Mr. Scott, prepare for a rough ride. Aye, Admiral. The engines won't let you down. Take us through, Mr. Sulu. The starship's powerful engine strained as the Enterprise followed Sulu's wildly looping course through the invisible menace. The helmsman made minute course corrections and changes. Kirk forgot to breathe as he watched, but finally the colored schematic yielded to the image of a small planet. Sulu looked up amazed at his shipmates. We made it! Hey, we made it! Spock piloted the shuttlecraft through Gateway's erratic winds, rolling and pitching, cruising only 100 meters above the jumbled grayish-white ruins that covered the ancient world. Nobody spoke aboard the craft. The Vulcans set them down onto what might have once been a courtyard. When they reached the Guardian, Spock stood before it, looking almost fragile in comparison with its enormous stone bulk. He began concentrating, focusing his entire being on picking up the mental emanations from the Guardian, trying to trace them through a vast trackless void, and he was succeeding. More confident now, Spock reached out to touch the monolith, but even as his fingers brushed the stone, he stiffened with a strangled cry, his eyes opened wide and blind, seeing, sensing, feeling agony, both physical and mental. Spock crumpled where he stood.
It was like being in space, out of control, speeding through darkness, shot through with totally alien images. They assaulted my mind with colors, shapes, glimpses of worlds I'd never seen, all flying by without sound. I heard telepathic voices in such profusion that they jumbled into a single mental scream. If I'd thought human minds alien, or the consciousness of the Horta, or even V'ger, they were as nothing to the mental chaos surrounding me now. The force of the Guardian's consciousness enveloped me. Vast, ancient, powerful. I was linked with an awareness that made all of V'ger's knowledge and logic seem infantile. And yet, that awareness was not passionless. The Guardian loved. It hungered. It was lonely. all on a level that made me feel that by comparison, I had always been the happiest of beings. Words, concepts took shape in my mind. Summoning, searching, fulfilled primary programming. But where? So many universes. Soon there will be an end to the loneliness. Continue summoning, searching. My mind, indeed my very life force, became only a fading spark in the rush of black nothingness trying to engulf me. It was as though I were a single candle trying to stand against a windstorm. With an effort that left my mind feeling wounded and bruised, I managed to pull my consciousness free from the darkness and the Guardian's summoning presence, and began the agonizing process of returning to my own body, knowing just how close to death I had come.
Spock, are you all right? Kirk's hazel eyes were filled with concern. The Vulcan shut his eyes, concentrating on slowing his breathing, controlling his reaction. I am... Well, he sat up. I was succeeding, but something happened. My telepathic abilities were not strong enough to shield my mind from the Guardians. His jaw tightened stubbornly. I must try again. Out of the question, absolutely not. You pointy-eared idiot, you almost died. Kirk glanced down at the tricorder's readings. Besides, the time waves have stopped. The Vulcan shook his head. Only for the moment, Admiral. I believe that my mental probe distracted the Guardian, momentarily. But it is searching for something, and it will not be diverted from its programming initiative. Soon the waves will resume. I must try again. The Admiral shook his head, but Spock could tell he was beginning to weaken. Why, Spock? What did you learn? The Guardian is preoccupied. Its attention is literally elsewhere, in another universe or dimension, searching. McCoy gave the time portal a skeptical glance. Searching for what? I do not know, Doctor. Something very important to it. Something it longs for and has missed for eons. And this preoccupation is causing the time waves? Yes. I believe that the Guardian gives off time waves much as most entities breathe. When it is aware, it controls those waves so they are not harmful. But the moment it returns its mental and physical energies to successfully completing its search, the destructive waves will resume. So, it's not being malicious, merely negligent. Spock headed purposefully for the Guardian. He heard a bitten-off exclamation from McCoy, but nobody stopped him. Spock tried harder, though he still did not dare to touch the stone entity. Faint echoes of contact tantalized him, but he could not probe deeply enough. But the Guardian must have known that contact was being attempted, because Spock received the faintest of messages.
Cannot neglect secondary programming. Many such journeys are possible. Let me be your gateway. Activate secondary intelligence peripheral to reinstate temporal programming function.
With a sigh of relief, Spock broke the mental link. James Kirk was gazing at him hopefully. Spock, were you able to successfully establish contact? Not a true contact, Jim. Although I was unable to establish a full mind meld with the Guardian, we now have access to someone who has done so. Kirk looked startled. You mean Tsar? Spock nodded. From the pictures he left on the wall of that palace stronghold in New Arian, he was a person of at least minor historical significance. I should be able to locate his image in Sarpedon's past and pinpoint it so that we will know when to jump through the Guardian. The Vulcan turned back to the stone monolith. "Guardian, this is Spock. I request to see the history of the planet Sarpedon."
Request acknowledged.
As the history of Sarpedon raced by before him, Spock used his tricorder to record the flickering images. Suddenly his body stiffened. Kirk and McCoy were staring at him anxiously. "Spock, what is it? Did you find him?" The Vulcan swallowed painfully, then took a deep breath. "I found him. Tsar ruled the entire La Creo Valley for nearly 2 decades. And then he fell in battle. I just watched him die." Leonard McCoy's blue eyes seemed suddenly faded and old. "Oh, God. I'm sorry, Spock." Kirk started to nod agreement, but then he paused and his expression grew hopeful. "Spock, we can save Tsar by yanking him away before that moment. Tell Scotty to beam down some clothes suitable for the time period. We'll leave immediately." Minutes later, dressed as poor herdsmen, the 3 officers stood before the Guardian as Sarpedon's history unrolled rapidly before them. Spock watched his tricorder intently. "On my count of 3. 1, 2, 3. They jumped and found themselves falling. They landed in thick black mud. Rain spattered them. Painfully, Spock forced air back into his straining lungs. He blinked, trying to see in the twilight dimness. Suddenly, a brutal hand seized his shoulder and hauled him upright. Spock squinted at the bearded, scowling warriors who surrounded them, holding barbed lances menacingly at the officers' throats. A bronze-armored officer approached, accompanied by a hooded figure. The warriors parted respectfully to let them through. When the figure pushed back its hood, they saw that the newcomer was a woman. She was tall and held herself proudly. A gold coronal, studded with rubies, held her bronze-colored hair off her forehead. Kirk bowed, and Spock and McCoy copied him. She studied them, her pale green eyes chilly. "I am Wynn, High Priestess of the Danrig. How did you come here? Who are you?" "I am James T. Kirk, Your Highness, and this is Leonard McCoy and Mr. Spock. We came from a faraway land." Spock cleared his throat. "We are not enemies, I assure you." She eyed him coldly. "I sense hidden things here. Your words are true, but the spirit behind them is a lie. I do not like being summoned out of a war council to listen to lies." All discussion between the officers and their captors abruptly ended when 2 nearby tents burst into flames. The officer shouted orders, and the warriors raced away to fight the fires. As the High Priestess turned to run, a group of riders galloped into the camp. And as she stepped forward to slash at the lead rider, a loop of rope flicked out from one of the other riders, dropping over her head. Wind flailed wildly, but it jerked tight over her shoulders, pulling her off her feet. In a moment, her captor had dragged her up across his saddle. He pointed to the 3 officers. "Bring the prisoners too." The doctor awoke to sunlight streaming in through a narrow, barred window. He groaned, discovering that he was extremely stiff and sore as he managed to sit up. The Admiral blinked groggily. "Bones? Are you okay?" "Well, I feel lousy, but I guess I'll live." Spock was already busy with his tricorder. My readings indicate we are located within a sizable population center, and those bars are made from wrought iron, which requires higher technology than the bronze we saw in Wynn's camp. Logic dictates that we have reached our goal, the city of New Arion. I don't give a damn whether this is the New Arion or the Emerald City. We just can't sit here on our butts in jail. We gotta break out. Tsar's battle could be today. We have to warn him, remember? I calculated our jump to bring us through several days before the battle, Doctor. Leonard McCoy raised an eyebrow. Yeah, and you calculated our last jump into Sarpedon's past so we'd find a cute little pointed-ear tyke, remember? The three officers rose to their feet as a tall, broad-shouldered man wearing chainmail armor and a scarlet cloak entered. McCoy saw that he walked with a distinct limp. They all stared at each other for a moment that seemed endless. Nobody spoke. Finally, the newcomer's fingers moved into the Vulcan salute. "Welcome to New Arion," Tsar said formally. Then a touch of humor softened his voice. "I must say you are the last three people I ever expected to find languishing in my dungeon." A faint half-smile curved the Vulcan's normally stern mouth. "Greetings, son. It has been too long." He eyed the sovereign measuringly. "Longer for you, even, than it has been for me." "It has been almost 20 years. His gray eyes grew hard and grim. "It's ironic to see you and realize that now we're nearly the same age." He stared at the Vulcan's face, at the features so like his own. "Now you really are my doppelganger. You know, of course, that this must mean that one of us is fated to die." Tsar knows he won't survive the coming battle, McCoy thought, taken aback. The doctor moistened suddenly dry lips. "Doppelganger? What's that?" Tsar smiled bitterly. "One of your ancient Earth legends, Leonard. If you encounter your doppelganger, your double, it's supposedly a sign of impending death." The Admiral hastily changed the subject. "We were surprised to find that you ruled this entire territory, Tsar." Tsar sighed. "I doubt that I will for much longer, Jim. We face overwhelming odds in the coming battle. That's why I needed to talk to the High Priestess of the Danreg." The ruler beckoned to a man waiting in the corridor. "My second-in-command, Cletus, will attend you until I'm free." Cletus bowed deeply to the three officers. Leonard McCoy frowned. "Tsar, this isn't a purely social visit." Tsar nodded. "Knowing the restrictions placed on the use of the Guardian, I've already guessed that much. But I must see the Lady Wynn as soon as possible." The sovereign grimaced as he wiped dirt off his forehead. "But at the moment, I must clean off some of the mud from the marching ground. I cannot afford to offend the Lady Wynn any more than I already have, can I?" He turned to leave. Spock started after him. "Son, wait. May I walk with you?" "Certainly, Father." They started off down the hall together.
I saw the weary despair in his eyes, and I realized that Tsar already knew what we had come to tell him. Somehow, my son was aware that he had only hours to live. As we walked together, he related to me a little of what had happened to him since we had parted so many years ago. His life had not been easy here in this ancient, barbaric era. The first tribesman he had encountered in ancient Sarpedon had pronounced him demon-spawned and threatened to kill him. However, by using his empathic skills to convince them of his goodwill, Tsar managed to gain acceptance. Soon, he became captain of the guard for the sovereign of the Lacreo Valley, and within a year had married Tekolin's only daughter, Arion. After only a few brief months of happiness, she had died in childbirth. Tsar's daughter had survived his wife by 6 hours. A year later, when Tekelin died, Tsar succeeded his father-in-law as sovereign. My son began using his advanced knowledge to improve his people's living conditions, just as he'd planned. The Lacreo Valley had prospered in peace for nearly 10 years. Then, the surrounding barbarian tribes had begun raiding. Small raids at first, but now the 3 largest tribes, including the Lady Wind's Danreg, had forged an alliance and were waiting only for the floodwaters of the nearby Red Bank to subside so they could invade. Tsar's forces were outnumbered nearly 4-1. I asked him how he knew of his impending death, and he told me of the Lady Wind's prophecy, pronounced to the Danreg troops just prior to our arrival and her abduction. Only if he who is halt walks healed, only if he who is death-struck in battle rises whole, can victory not be ours. Tsar smiled a little, a bitter grimace of a smile, as he told me that the Lady Wind's record as an oracle was unblemished. She had never been wrong. The fatalistic shadow in Tsar's eyes concerned me deeply. I could sense his weariness, his pain, almost as if they were my own. This was partially because Tsar, as an empath, could sense and broadcast feelings as well as thoughts. But also, as I first discovered nearly 15 years ago on Desolate Gateway, there is a blood tie between us. In many ways, we are much alike. I told Tsar that I wished him to return to my world with me, this time to stay. His duty to his people, I observed, would be equally discharged whether he fell in battle or became missing in action. Even before he spoke, I knew what his answer would be. He told me that he could not abandon his people to their fate. He reminded me of the importance of morale in battle. In his place, he told me, I would do the same. I knew that he was right, but that did not make it any easier to accept his decision.
The Lady Win, High Priestess of the Danreg, sat gracefully upright in her chair. She was afraid, but years of acting as her father's second-in-command had trained her to conceal her feelings from enemies. She wondered why she had been abducted. Since arriving in New Ariane, she had been well treated, had been given hot water for bathing, a fine gown to wear, and food to eat. Obviously, they wanted her alive and well. But why? Perhaps Win thought, this man they call the Sovereign wants to plead for the lives of his people. If it were possible to capture New Ariane without much bloodshed, she would encourage her father to do so. Saving lives would please the goddess. Ashmara was a woman's deity, and life was her concern. Besides, Win hated the looting, killing, raping sprees that were a conquered city's lot. In the screams of the vanquished, she recalled her own cries when she discovered the hacked bodies of her husband and son 2 years ago. Their deaths. Rorgan had lied when he'd told her father that those troops had been acting against orders when they'd slaughtered the people in the Danreg camp. Win knew when people lied. She had always been able to sense the inner feelings of others. It was a gift of the goddess, this ability, as were the prophetic visions she experienced. But Heldeon, her father, neither understood nor trusted her power, so Win had not voiced what she knew about Rorgan. But someday her opportunity to pay the Assyri back would come. Win trusted her goddess to render justice at the proper time. She tensed and swung to face the man who entered. He was tall and well-muscled, his waist lean, obviously a warrior in fighting trim, except that he was crippled. A strange face, long and sharp-angled. His eyes were the gray of distant storm clouds, and his brows slanted upward. Behind those eyes, Wynne sensed despair. She was troubled by that, and by the sense that she had seen him before, though they had never met. He gave her a formal bow. "My lady, may I sit?" "Please do, sovereign." "You are Ashmara's priestess, a goddess who loves life. I wish to spare the lives of my people and yours. Are lives important to you?" "Yes, they are. In the coming battle, not only soldiers will die, but all the men, women, and children of New Arian. If we lose, they'll be massacred." Wynne again felt that stab of recognition. "That's true. Our forces are overwhelming." Something about this man compelled honesty from her. "While I am outraged at my capture, I sympathize with your concern for your people. Then you will intercede?" He broke off as she shook her head. "I will speak with my father, and he will listen to me. But I have no influence over the Karen or the Assyri. Our alliance has been uneasy." His disappointment touched her. "I am truly sorry." "I can tell. But there is another tactic." Wynne could not look away from his eyes. "What tactic?" "I am talking, my lady, about marriage. Between you and me. How interesting." "State your terms, my lord." "They tell me bride raiding is an accepted custom among your people. So if you freely consent to wed me, your father would forgive me for abducting you. Then Heldion would be my kin by marriage, and thus unable to raise sword against my valley. We will still be outnumbered, but we will have a chance. As things stand now, we have none." "But why should I enter such an alliance?" "I will name you my co-regent and successor. This valley is prosperous. You will possess a tidy domain." "This alliance would benefit us more than our current one with Rorgan and Laol. There we are committed only to war and death," Wynne thought, studying him. "Your offer is tempting, but risky. If you are willing, we must act now. A message to your father, followed by the ceremony, an announcement tomorrow." What it would be like to sleep tonight beside this stranger, Wynne wondered. "There is one thing. They say you are not as other men, which I can see with my own eyes. But they say—" She broke off, embarrassed. "That I am demon-spawned? You believe that?" "No, of course not. But if there is some secret about you, tell me what it is. I have a right to know exactly what manner of man I contract to bed." "You misunderstand, my lady. I did not intend that this should be a true marriage. Physically, that is." "Oh? Why not? Aren't you capable?" His expression hardened. "I was married once. She died. I have no wish for that kind of relationship again. Now that you understand my terms, do you agree?" "I know what it is to lose those dearest to you. I was almost convinced, but I cannot reconcile your kind of marriage with my service to Ashmara." "Why not?" "Ashmara would not look with favor upon an imitation marriage, and besides, were I to marry again, I would pray for children, for the succession. Select a consort, have his children. Our union will last only a day or two. Then you will rule New Arian alone." He looked at her, noting her bewilderment. "Have you forgotten? You declared I will not survive the battle." Wynne stared back at him, shocked, only now understanding that persistent sense of familiarity. Only yesterday she had seen this man die. She barely knew him, yet the thought of his death was a pain like a sword within her. "I had forgotten, my lord. The visions come, but I remember little of them." "And they always come true?" in one form or another. She saw that he seemed almost unconcerned. "Don't you care about what you're facing?"
"I ought to. But what good would it do?"
"But now that you know, you can guard against it. You must try. Your death would be a tragedy because you are a good person. I can tell what's inside people."
"I know you can. So can I."
"But it's Ashmana's gift and you're a man. How could that be?"
"I'll prove it. Take my hand."
As Wynne touched him, she could feel his despair, loneliness, and determination. He was reading her too, her pain, her love for life. They were mirrors of one another, but his was the shadowed reflection. Fight, she thought at him fiercely. Rage. For a moment, something vital and alive flared within him. She took a deep breath. "I accept your proposal." The sovereign bowed deeply, then kissed her hand. Wynne could feel the warmth of his breath on her skin. "My lady, I thank you." Leonard McCoy busied himself spreading jam on a roll as Kirk and Spock stood at the window, watching Tsar's forces drilling. The door opened and Cletus stood there. "The Sovereign is free to speak with you now." The three officers followed him down the hall to Tsar's office, the room with the mural he'd painted long ago, showing the Enterprise. The Sovereign quickly told them of the marriage ceremony scheduled to take place that same night. Tsar sat frowning as Kirk quickly described the reason why they had come back into the past to find him. He described the Guardian's erratic behavior and Spock's failure at contact. The Vulcan nodded when the Admiral had finished. "Your Esper abilities are greater than mine, son. Perhaps you can succeed."
"I told you before, I have a battle to fight."
Kirk took a deep breath. "Tsar, there's something we know that may influence your decision. You don't survive the battle."
"I know."
At Kirk's surprised glance, the Vulcan nodded. "He does know, Jim. Wynne had a vision of what we saw."
"Who cares how he found out, just as long as he avoids it by coming back with us?" "No, Leonard. I feel too old to change."
"That's a lot of bull, and you know it."
"Bones,
it's Tsar's decision to make." But McCoy shrugged off Kirk's grip and strode over to the Sovereign, eyes blazing. "Damn it, Tsar! It takes more courage to keep living than to give in and die." He took a deep, shaking breath. "And if you don't contact the Guardian, it's going to mean our lives, the lives of all the people in the Milky Way galaxy, and eventually every galaxy." There was a long, tense silence as Tsar studied the table, and the officers studied the floors. Finally, Tsar spoke, though it seemed more to himself than to them. "All right, Leonard. I'll try to think of something." He stood up, his mouth tightening as his lame leg took his weight. McCoy took out his medical scanner and ran it over Tsar's left thigh. "You know, son, there might be something I could do for that, if you came back with us." "You really know how to raise the stakes in this game, don't you, Doc?" Wynne was nervous, which surprised her. Why should her stomach knot, her hands shake? The High Priestess turned her attention back to the vellum that held the agreement between her people and Tsar's. She had told her father the truth about Rorgan, and he had broken his alliance with the murderer and sworn to fight with his new Lacreo kin by marriage. Almost before Wynne knew what was happening, her waiting women had dressed her in her green wedding gown and placed her gold coronal on her head. Outwardly she was ready, but inwardly her mind was in turmoil. Great Mother, why did I agree to this? She wondered as she stood in the torchlit circle, watching Tsar approach with his father on his right, Cletus on his left. A priestess approached the couple. Using leather thongs dyed green, she began wrapping their arms together until Tsar and Wynne stood bound, fingertip to elbow. The priestess stepped back, leaving them bound together. The binding is complete. They can only be separated by death. Ashmara has witnessed it. Much later, Tsar was sitting alone in his bedchamber. Come. Spock entered and sat down across from him. The Vulcan stretched his booted legs out to the fire, obviously welcoming the warmth. I hoped you might be awake, Tsar. I have just completed a scan of this world's history to determine the effect of your death in the time stream. You need not fear changing history if, instead, you elect to come back with us. What happens to New Arion? Peace descends. The Lacreo Valley continues to prosper. I'm glad you told me. It makes it easier. It does not have to happen. Spock's dark eyes were very serious. Tsar, if you return with me, you could visit Earth, Vulcan, the explored universe. No matter how good it feels to have him show openly that he cares about me, I can't let him sway me, Tsar thought. You've changed, Father. So have you, son. Yes, I have. I came back here to conquer the world, but instead, it conquered me. McCoy was right. I've become a coward. Why do you say that? I'm afraid to risk caring about anyone. You see, I've lost so many people. Arion, others, my mother. With each death, I've received a vision and a warning. I see them mentally, and I get dizzy, disoriented. Then, unless I can stop what's going to happen to them, I share death with them. It's horrible. I agree, but the alternative is to live without friendship or warmth in a sterile, joyless environment. That could be worse. Are you saying that logic isn't everything? I'm shocked, Father. I would not admit it to Leonard McCoy, but some things do transcend logic. Tsar leaned forward, his momentary amusement vanishing. If that's true, you're saying that I must keep caring no matter who dies and what it does to me when it happens. You're saying I should fight to stay alive, when I have it on the best authority that I'm nothing but a corpse, just waiting to fall. He looked down, biting his lip, struggling to regain control. A hand touched Tsar's shoulder gently, then was gone. He took a deep breath and looked at Spock. Just when I think I'm resigned, I realize part of me doesn't want to die. I am vastly relieved to hear that. I had feared that you were resigned past the need for striving. The thought distressed me more than I can say. Thank you for telling me that. You've given me a lot to think about. His father rose to leave. Rest well, and peacefully, my son. Then he was gone. Tsar sat considering Spock's words. Suddenly, he sensed someone in the room. Jumping up, He swept the heavy folds aside. "My lady wife, wouldn't you be more comfortable near the fire?" Court Wynne's composure was admirable. "Thank you, my lord. I am somewhat chilled." Tsar led her over to the chair by the fire. "I did not mean to eavesdrop, my lord. I came to tell you that I received another sending. You must go with your father and help him. It may be your only means of saving yourself. And if you could be saved..." "Why should it matter to you?" "It matters. I'm not afraid to care what happens to others. Do you honestly think you have some monopoly on pain?" "I'll show you, and you can judge." "Very well, my lord. Show me." Tsar leaned over to touch her face, and his mind surged into hers. Years passed in a heartbeat. Growing up with only Zarabeth, the loneliness, the longing for his father, his mother's death, and then his wife Arian, dead, and his infant daughter. Their deaths had shattered him. All the deaths, all the pain and loss. But then the meld became two-way, and he experienced Wynne's past, her own mother's death, finding her husband and 5-year-old son butchered in the ruins of her home. Tsar realized that Wynne was right. He had no monopoly on suffering. But she had been strong enough to keep caring and not resent its price. As the meld dissolved, Tsar discovered that she was in his arms, sobbing against his shoulder. He held her tightly. "Shh, you were right. Quiet now. Shh." She looked up at him, her green eyes holding his. "Tsar, you have been honest with me, so I must be honest with you. My dear lord, sometime during this past day, I found myself loving you, wanting you. Nothing like this ever happened to me before." Tsar nodded as he reached up to caress her cheek. "I've felt it too. Ever since we met, there was something binding us." Through their mental link, Tsar realized that she very much wanted him to kiss her. So he did. Their kiss filled them both with a starving intensity that blotted out everything except the blind, instinctive need to unite, mind and body, totally. Lovemaking shook and consumed them. Passion seared away the last of Tsar's death shadow, leaving only physical exhaustion. And finally, sleep. James T. Kirk found Spock standing, hands clasped behind his back. "Tsar has agreed to accompany us, Spock." "Will he remain in our time?" "No, he's returning to New Arian for the battle. He won't budge on that." Kirk frowned worriedly. "Damn it, Spock. Tsar's been through a lot recently. I'm afraid he's not up to this. Are we doing the right thing, asking him to tackle the Guardian? What if he cracks?" "I'm also concerned, especially in view of what happened to me. McCoy was right. I nearly died. But our duty is to restore the time portal. We have no choice but to let Tsar try." "Well then, let's go. We've got a universe to save." As he landed on Gateway's ashy soil, Tsar's mind was overwhelmed with a terrible emptiness. Wynne. No. She was gone. Erased, as though she had never been. Tsar's knees buckled as blackness threatened. Spock grabbed his shoulders, supporting him as he explained to Kirk and McCoy. He has lost contact with Wynne. In this time and place, she is dead. That is a grave shock for the survivor of a bonding. He addressed Tsar again. Son, Wynne is not dead. She is just on the other side of the time portal. Tsar straightened, somehow fighting off the effects of that echoing void in his mind. He opened his eyes. I'm all right now. I can control it. Tsar moved closer to the ancient monolith, Spock by his side. It's embarrassing to admit, but I'm scared. A logical reaction. So was I. Before he could change his mind, Tsar reached over and laid both his hands on the stone. He began to probe, putting all his effort into breaking through. Guardian, he projected the thought. He noted with alarm that the pulses were steadily fading. Guardian, you are losing the link to your physical existence. Come with me before you are lost. Tsar caught only fragments of the Guardian's thought processes, but it was accepting his offer. He headed back. Immediately he knew he was in trouble. The energy he had expended to reach the Guardian had left him with little in reserve. His own mind-body link was weak and fading. Suddenly, the strength was there. Not his own energy, but another's. As he drew on that other power, he recognized it was Spock's. He began moving again, and the Guardian was still following him. The surrounding darkness grew lighter, and then he was back. Tsar felt stone against his hands and Vulcan fingers against his temple. Tsar started to thank Spock for rescuing him. Just as the universe around them exploded into a million insane pieces. I'm going mad, was the Sovereign's first thought as he lurched back, trying to hide from the searing barrage of color erupting from the time portal. Tsar staggered forward and made a grab for his father's arm. He thrust Spock into the shelter of a crumbling wall. The assault began invading his mind. The Sovereign struggled to remain conscious, but it was like being awake in an unending nightmare. Tsar returned to awareness slowly. He was sprawled on the ground, Spock crumpled beneath him. Jim? McCoy? I don't know. They were further away. What happened? I don't know. Something erupted from the portal. Do you see any sign of our attackers? I don't believe those things had physical bodies. The Vulcan looked at his tricorder. I'm picking up Jim and McCoy. They are undamaged. What about the beings from the Guardians? They heard a warm, feminine voice call. Tsar. Spock. I'm sorry, that wasn't intentional. Come out, please. I am dead, Tsar thought, feeling the blood drain from his face. Or mad. Then he saw Spock's expression and realized his father heard the voice too. It was Zarabeth. She was standing near the Guardian of Forever, her pale hair brushing the shoulders of her fur tunic. With a gesture that was so familiar that it hurt Tsar to watch, she raised a hand to push back a strand of wind-tossed hair. Tsar? Son? The Sovereign sagged against the stone, his palms pressed against his eyes. Spock stared, then propped himself against the wall. The Vulcan rubbed his temples wearily. When he spoke, it was with pain. Son, you know that cannot be Zarabeth. She came out of the Guardian. Maybe it rescued her before she... Spock just stared at him wordlessly. But she's so real. Spock? Zar? Please, we need to talk. The Vulcan sighed. We are being presented an image extracted from our minds. The beings who came out of the time portal are giving us an illusion we would both recognize. Perhaps they wish to talk or reassure us. You're right. Zar? Spock? Please. They stepped out from behind the wall and headed toward the woman standing before the time entity. Zar, I've missed you. Spock, to see you again. Two warm arms clasped the Sovereign's neck in an ecstatic embrace. Zar saw Jim Kirk and Leonard McCoy walk over to join the Vulcan. All of them looked as astonished as he felt. The Sovereign permitted himself a hug. Then he kissed the being's cheek gently and stepped back. I never got to say farewell to my mother, but now I feel I have. Thank you. Now, please, who are you? I am not an I, strictly speaking, but suppose I say I, all right? I created this world, including the Guardian of Forever. Kirk looked taken aback. Why did you create the Guardian, and when? The being looked around vaguely. Well, we made the Guardian because this universe had gotten so small. There were more of us then. But I can't tell you when. It's been too long. We used it to journey in time, but then we decided to sample other dimensions. And now you've returned to this universe? Kirk gave Spock an uneasy glance. Zar understood the Admiral's concern. These creatures were powerful, but confused and quixotic. What would their next whim be? It was my idea. We wanted to come home. But it's been so long, we've forgotten what our natural forms are. Spock stepped forward. How many of you are there? What are you called? 3. Only 3 of us are left. It's been too long. The Guardian of Forever suddenly spoke. I call them the Originators. I regret having neglected my duties in this continuum, Admiral Kirk. I am functioning normally again. McCoy sighed. Well, thank heaven for small miracles. I had to respond to my primary programming when my originators contacted me. Searching nearly infinite numbers of dimensions required almost all of my capabilities. Zar looked down at Zarabeth. But, Originator, why did you wish to return? She gave him a wan smile. We have come home to die. Suddenly, a man stood before the Admiral, slightly taller, broad-shouldered, with hazel eyes. He had an impish grin Jim remembered all too well from their shared escapades as children. Sam! The image of Kirk's dead brother hesitated. The truth is, Jim, we're tired. Winding down. We want to find our planet of origin again. We can't remember it, but we will when we find it, if we have to search for a millennium. Leonard McCoy looked extremely uneasy. Would you really search for 1,000 years? Sam nodded. If necessary. It would be easier if you agreed to assist us. Kirk's eyes narrowed. Assist you with what? Zarabeth blinked vapidly. Yes, with what? Expending the energy necessary for travel would greatly shorten our remaining time. Zar had no difficulty sensing the Admiral's shocked anger. He didn't blame Jim. The Originators were talking about commandeering the Enterprise to take them on their insane search for a world that might not even exist. Kirk shook his head stubbornly. Now, just a minute. My ship is on a mission. Sam gave him a searching look. You may have no choice, Admiral. My comrades can be persuasive. Jim. Zar touched the Admiral's elbow. There is one originator we haven't seen yet, but I'm picking up its mental emanations. The creature is completely mad. Mad and vicious. We can't turn these aliens loose to wreak havoc on an unsuspecting universe. Kirk confronted the image of his brother squarely. Originator, I don't think you comprehend the ramifications of your return on this universe. More than 1,000 beings have already died because the Guardian was searching for you. Your people pose a grave threat to this continuum. The Guardian of Forever suddenly spoke in Zar's mind.
People have died because I was obeying my primary programming.
The ancient time entity's thought was full of grief and remorse.
Admiral Kirk spoke the truth,
Zar silently returned.
but we understand that you could not act against your own programming.
Sam's image glanced at the others. We are all sorry to hear about these deaths, but what has happened has happened. Why should our continued presence be harmful? Kirk sighed. Because of your power. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Can you be sure the others will not cause tragedy before you can stop them? Zarabeth looked from Zar to Spock. The Admiral is right. We would endanger this continuum and the beings inhabiting it. As Zar watched, the originators winked out, and the air was again filled with a barrage of color, sound, taste, and feeling. Then all the shapes coalesced, merging into one entity. Zar frowned and closed his eyes and felt a brush of skewed, warped thinking, of intense psychotic paranoia. Something's going wrong. They're not leaving. I can feel them. Feel that one of them is preventing the others from going. The air in front of Zar swirled, and suddenly the image of Arian, his dead wife, stood before him. You are not real, Zar told her, trying to ignore the way her fluffy dark hair brushed her slight shoulders, and her beautiful dark eyes held his. Then she snarled at him, her face twisting with an expression the real Arian's face had never held. Oh, yes. Then perhaps you'd rather see the reality, Sovereign. See me as I was the moment your child killed me, bloody and thrashing in agony, gasping because I had no strength left to scream. No! Stop it! A wave of vertigo hit him then, gagging him, and Zar had to clench his teeth to keep from vomiting. This is how I feel when people I care about are in danger of dying, he realized. They're going to kill us. Then they'll take the Enterprise and do as they please. If only we could fight them. Kirk stepped forward. Let's talk about this. There's nothing to talk about. You will not help us. You want us to die. Zar struggled against the nausea. Dizzily, he braced one hand against the Guardian, knowing that the end could not be far off because his sickness was so intense. Then the Guardian spoke in his mind again.
Do not sacrifice yourself, Zar. I will help you against them. I cannot allow them to destroy the universe I have protected for so long. Link with me. Lend me all your mental strength. You have it,
Zar promised. Aloud he called, Spock! A hand clamped onto his own, held hard, and father and son had become one mind even as the image of Arian expanded, reaching out to obliterate them. The Guardian used their combined mental strength to create a vortex that lashed out from the time portal's opening, catching the hostile originator off guard. At first she was drawn towards that churning void, But then she began to resist. The Guardian widened the maelstrom it had created. Tsar used all his and Spock's strength to drag the aliens toward the vortex. But it was not going to be enough. Suddenly, a tiny measure of additional strength entered the meld. Only a thread, but it was enough to tip the balance. The originators were drawn into the heart of that whirling, writhing nothingness. And then they were gone. The Guardian spoke aloud. They will never find their way back. Please accept my gratitude. All of you who helped me realize where my duty lay. One of them left you a message. It spoke in the voice of Sam Kirk. We leave you to your own destiny. Farewell, children.
Tsar protested returning to the Enterprise with us so Dr. McCoy could treat his lame leg, but the Guardian of Forever reassured him that it would return him to Wynn and his valley a mere heartbeat after he had left, so he agreed. After Dr. McCoy successfully healed his lameness, Tsar spent the next 5 weeks conditioning his leg and his body, preparing for the greatest challenge of his life. At night, we went over his battle plans, adjusting and revising them, until we were both certain that his troops would have their best chance at holding back the invaders. During our time together, we grew to know each other well. The restraint I had felt when I first met my son had vanished long ago. At long last, we were able to speak freely. The closer the time drew to Tsar's inevitable departure, the more I found myself hoping that he would change his mind and stay. For the first time, I truly understood my own father's angry rejection of my decision to join Starfleet. Sarek wanted me to pursue the career he had selected for me, partly because he felt that would be a truly ethical choice, but also he wanted to keep me safe. A Starfleet officer leads a far less protected existence than that of a scientist at the Vulcan Science Academy. I realized that my logic was seriously compromised due to personal involvement, but that seemed a minor consideration when I pondered what my son would face when he leaped back through the Guardian. I described to him what I had seen in my tricorder, warning him of every detail I could recall, hoping that somehow he would be able to avert the grim fate that awaited him. With all my being, I wanted to help him, but there seemed no way I could do so. But there are always possibilities.
Tsar stood on Moorgate Plain, a large, rolling expanse of turf that sloped toward the Red Bank. Cletus, are we ready? All troops in position, sire. Good. Slowly, the Sovereign picked his way through the pre-dawn darkness, back to the command tent. Wynn stood in the middle of it, double-checking her armor. Tsar smiled at her, wishing they had more time. Since that first embrace when he'd returned, they'd been too swamped by duties to exchange more than a few private words. But now, it was time for him to don his own armor. Finally, he belted on his broadsword, then glanced at Wynn. Ready, my lady? Ready, my lord. Tsar leaned over to give her a quick kiss. Then together they went out. Rorgan and Leol's forces began their attack about an hour after dawn. At first the Lacreo lines held firm, but then Rorgan's archers took deadly toll, and moments later the Assyri warriors were pouring through. Tsar was in the middle of them, shouting commands to his troops to fill the gaps, all the while slashing at shoulders and throats as his battle-trained mount leaped and charged. A lance struck him on the side, but it was deflected by his mail. Then he caught another on his shield. Suddenly Tsar's mount stumbled and fell, but the sovereign leapt clear. He fought on, grimly. Cut, thrust, parry, forehand, parry. Tsar realized that he was being forced to retreat up a steep slope. He was panting hard, but his arm still moved with sure precision. All at once, there was no opponent left standing before him. The sovereign glanced around, puzzled, seeing that the Assyri warriors had drawn back into a rough circle. As he gasped, trying to catch his breath, Tsar saw a big man, as tall as he and heavier built, step out of the circle. The man carried his sword in his left hand. Where his right should have been was a round ball studded with vicious spikes. Rorgan Death Hand, Tsar realized. The killer of Win's husband and child. The Assyri leader's bronze sword hissed through the air. The sovereign leaped back, parrying the blow on his shield. Rorgan's arms bulged as he forced Tsar's shield down. With a shout, the sovereign brought his foot down hard on his opponents. Then, as Rorgan yelped, he leaped away. Tsar backed away, circling, his eyes never leaving his opponents. With a howl, the man charged, his mace impacting on Tsar's shield with staggering force. Then their swords whanged together, steel against bronze. They heaved at each other, grunting with effort. Finally, Tsar hooked his heel behind Rorgan's and jerked upward. The Assyri went over on his back, rolled, then came up fast with blades swinging. The sovereign took the blow on his right shoulder, but the impact staggered him and he nearly fell. Then the mace slammed into his side, sending him to his knees. I am on a hillock, just as Spock described it, Tsar realized. This must be the moment he saw. I have only one chance, and it'll leave me open to a head attack. If I fail, that mace is going to do exactly what Spock described. Rorgan moved in, and Tsar backed away, altering his grip on the hilt of his sword, presenting his right side. In one sudden move, his body uncoiled in a full extension fencing lunge, just as Sulu had taught him long ago. The sword's point plunged through Rorgan's leather kilt, sinking deep into the Assyri leader's body. He fell. Panting, Tsar looked up, seeing the stunned expressions of the Assyri warriors, and beyond them, Cletus and his troops coming down slope. I can't believe it, he thought, turning slowly around. I'm still here. I've won. Tsar never felt the blow that struck the side of his head, hurtling him into darkness. Spock materialized on a rocky slope, glanced around, then gave a short, satisfied nod. The Guardian had deposited him in the foothills bordering Moorgate Plain. Spock had no difficulty locating the battle itself. Unwrapping the whip-like wound from around his waist, Spock raced toward the hillock. As he scrambled up the last slope, the Vulcan found himself in a circle of warriors. An armed figure stood in that circle, sword ready, clutching a small, battered shield. From his stance and chainmail, the Vulcan recognized Tsar. A blood-drenched body lay sprawled at his feet. The Sovereign pivoted slowly around, just as there came a blur of movement on Spock's left. One of the Assyri warriors leaped toward Tsar's unprotected back, axe high. That's it. This is the moment I saw, Spock thought. No, he yelled, knocking enemy soldiers aside as though they were straw men as he lunged after the Assyri. With every bit of skill he could summon, Spock lashed out with the wound, his target the warrior's raised weapon, and missed. The wound whipped around the man's neck instead, just as the axe impacted with the Sovereign's helmet. Spock glimpsed his son's bloody face, heard him grunt as the breath went out of him. Tsar's
settled over Spock. I've failed to come this close and fail. He dropped to his knees beside his son's still body, then gently rolled him over onto his back. The Sovereign's face was a gory, greenish mask, blood trickling from his nose in a thin, steady stream. Spock stared unbelievingly at the blood, watching it well, then drip. He's still alive. A hand grabbed his arm, and Spock looked up to see Cletus crouching beside him. "What the hell do you think you're—" "I'm sorry, sir. I didn't realize who you were." "Tsar's alive. We must get him to safety." Cletus nodded bitterly. "So much for the prophecy. Damn it, we were holding them." "Prophecy? Remember Wynn's oracle? His leg's healed all right, which makes the first part true. But now, unless he wakes up and walks out there, we've had it. If our troops think he's dead, that'll take the spirit right out of them." The Vulcan met Cletus' gaze. "Suppose he does stand up and walk out there." "Yes, by Ashmara, it could work." Quickly, Cletus snatched up the blood-smeared helm. "Here, put this on. Where's his red cloak?" He thrust a mail shirt and quilted leather at the Vulcan. "Just stand there on the hillside and let them see your face." Spock swung the red folds around his shoulder and eased the scarlet-plumed helmet over his head. Hastily, he buckled Tsar's sword belt around him. Down on the battlefield, someone noticed him and pointed. Spock pulled off the helmet, tucking it under his left arm. Cheering began as Tsar's troops looked up, growing until flowed in waves of jubilation. The Vulcan could see the Assyri and Karen forces hesitate, then point at him, frightened. They're almost ready to flee, he thought. But I need something else. Jim has a flair for the dramatic. What would he do? He grasped the sticky hilt of the sword, then drew it, holding the stained blade high in salute. Victory! The enemy troops broke and ran. Gently, Wynn helped Spock and Cletus lower Tsar's body onto the bed. The second-in-command saluted her and left. Tsar's head turned. Then the least swollen of his eyelids lifted, and he squinted up at his father. "I knew it. I'm dead and gone to hell." The Vulcan hid his profound relief with an exaggerated sigh. "Very funny. How do you feel?" "Terrible. Hurts all over." Tsar slowly sat up. "That must have been some whack on the head." He looked at his father, bewildered. But you're not supposed to be here. Why did you come back?" Wynn smiled and grasped her husband's hand tightly. "To save your life, my dear." And quickly, she related the entire story. "Well, if there's a logical reason for your actions, I'd like to know what it is. I told you before that I've discovered that some things transcend logic. This was one of them. Now you will be able to live without fighting continually." Spock glanced at both of them. "While I would like to stay longer, I must return to my ship. It will not take Jim long to realize that I have gone, and where. The last time I left without orders, he threatened to push me out the airlock without a vacuum suit." "Farewell, Fatherkin. May Ashmara hold you in her hand." "Peace and long life, Lady Wynn." "We'll never see each other again, will we?" "No. I cannot imagine that we will. I regret that. Farewell, son."
peace and long life. Farewell, Father. Live long and prosper. Spock did not look back as he felt the Guardian's time displacement seize him. A heartbeat later, he was standing on Gateway's sterile soil, hearing the moaning wind. He took out his communicator. Spock to Enterprise. I am requesting beam up.
Spock, are you all right?
I will be, Jim. The Vulcan looked back at the Guardian, envisioning Tsar's face, wind beside him, knowing he was no longer alone. Goodbye, my son. The transporter beam caught him. Then Spock was gone.
The Enterprise is quiet. It is late at night. I have just returned from my final check on the bridge. Jim announced that he was going to let me mind the store on our return trip. After all, Captain Spock, he said, rank hath its privileges, and I need a rest before I go back to that desk job. It was a mistake, I believe, for James Kirk to relinquish command of the Enterprise. I understand that he felt it was his duty, but I continually sense his restlessness and desire to return to space. Knowing how much he longs to be back aboard his ship, I have scheduled a training cruise early next month. I intend to suggest to the Admiral that he handle the accompanying inspection himself, though I know he detests inspections. It will be good to have Jim aboard the Enterprise again, even though we will be contending with a cadet crew still unnerved by their encounter with the Kobayashi Maru test. My thoughts turn, as they often do, to my son, and I realize for the first time that the situation Tsar faced was very similar to the no-win scenario presented by the Kobayashi Maru test. But Tsar, like a cadet named James T. Kirk, managed to defeat the no-win aspect of his challenge, with Wynn's help and mine. I never took the Kobayashi Maru test. I've often wondered, as I score my cadet's performance, what my solution would have been. The Enterprise is quiet. The engines are running smoothly as we warp toward Earth and our next mission.
Time for Yesterday was written and abridged by A.C. Crispin and read by James Doohan, with Leonard Nimoy as the voice of Spock.